Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are doing a webinar on a week without driving, and today you're going to learn what it is, why it matters, and how to do it in your community. The website or webinar facilitators today are Mike McGinn, who is the Executive Director here at America Walks, Anna Zivarts, who is the Director of Disability Mobility Initiative Program, and then I'm Kate Spielmaker. I'm the Communications Manager here with America Walks, and I will be running the tech here in the background. We want to take a quick moment to thank our partners. We have the Center for Disease Control, EcoCounter, Tool Design, and General Motors. Thank you all for supporting our work. If this is your first webinar or if you are a regular attendee of our webinars, thank you so much. Your support helps directly impact grassroots organizing on the ground. There will be a link in the chat here momentarily if you'd like to donate to our work. And then lastly, for the tech purposes, if you do have a question, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can ask a question in, and we will try to answer all of them during our robust Q&A section. Mike, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you. So, yeah, no, I'm really excited about this. You know, as many of you, as some in the audience may know, I am from Seattle, and I've known of the work of the Disability Mobility Initiative. And 2 years ago, or a year plus ago, they ran their first Week Without Driving campaign. And they recruited people to take on that challenge, to experience what that was like. This year, and we'll hear from Anna Zivarts in a minute, from the Disability Mobility Initiative to talk more about this year's campaign. But I was just really struck by how much more expansive this second year of the campaign was, the types of people that did it, what happened on social media. I saw a lot of action on social media. I'm still tapped into the Washington State social media, of course. And so I had a particular interest in trying to bring this to a broader audience, because I think it's a campaign worth knowing about, thinking about, and perhaps joining in when it comes around next year. So our panelists today are Jani Hitchen, who's a council member for District 6 in Pierce County, Washington; Devin Silvernail, the policy director of Seattle; council member Tammy; and Krystal Monteros, president of the Tacoma Area Commission on Disability, and an advocate herself on these issues. And what we'll get is, I'll turn it over to Anna in a second to give us an overview of the campaign and how it worked, and then we'll bring back all the panelists to talk about the effect it had, what they learned from it, and what they want to share with you. So Anna, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for hosting this. I'm going to share my screen with you all and talk a little bit about how Week Without Driving got started and what is the Disability Mobility Initiative. And I apologize, I'm at the airport, so you may be able to hear some of that, but it just wasn't going to work to do it any other way this morning. So this is a photo of the Week Without Driving this year, and you're going to hear from Jani and Krystal, who are both pictured here. We had an event in Krystal's neighborhood in Tacoma to talk about some missing sidewalks. So the background, how Week Without Driving got started. The Disability Mobility Initiative is a program of Disability Rights Washington in Washington State. I know we have a national audience. We're the state Washington. The program started because when we reached out to the community of disabled Washingtonians to identify what are community priorities for advocacy, we hear constantly about transportation and lack of transportation access being a major barrier to people with disabilities in our state. And so in the fall of 2020, I had the opportunity to launch a transportation access specific program at Disability Rights Washington. And that program is the Disability Mobility Initiative. But because my background is in labor and immigrant rights organizing, I wanted to make sure that this was an intersectional organizing campaign, that we weren't just focusing on people who identified as disabled, but we could organize a broader base of people who rely on transit and on walking and rolling and biking to get around their communities. Because I know that there's a much bigger group of folks who are out there who don't have reliable access to a car. And we're trying to get better data on who this is, right? How many of us non-drivers are out there? But it's between a quarter, perhaps even a third, perhaps even a half of the population in some places. And we know that people with disabilities are 4 times more likely to not drive a car and 2 to 3 times more likely to live in a 0 vehicle household. Additionally, Black people, immigrants, and Native Americans and Alaskans are most likely to live in a household without a vehicle. So we know this work is important to make sure that everyone can get around their communities. And so the Disability Mobility Initiative started to speak to non-drivers from throughout Washington state and document those stories as part of our Transportation Access for Everyone story map project. And these are some images of some of these profiles of people that we organize with who are featured on our story map. And today, I think we've interviewed more than 230 people, and those interviews, you can check them out. We've also published a white paper based on some of the recommendations we found. But we wanted to go a step further and have elected leaders in those in decision-making positions within Washington state have the opportunity to understand some of the barriers that arise in our communities when you're trying to get around without reliable access to a vehicle. And so last October, we held our first annual Week Without Driving, and then we did it again this September. And basically how the Week Without Driving works is you can get around any way you want. You can even get a ride in a car. What you can't do is drive yourself, unless you absolutely have to. And then if you break the challenge, that's fine too. And it's important to also recognize that that will probably happen. And thinking about those moments when you do decide to drive, if you have that privilege, and what someone who didn't have that choice would do in that situation. We wanted to be really clear that this isn't a disability simulation. The experience of people with disabilities is going to be different than someone who is able-bodied. But this could give elected leaders and folks who wouldn't otherwise have the understanding of what it's like to wait at a bus stop or try to get to a bus stop in the rain, a glimpse into our lives. We also recognize that there's a lot of privilege that comes from living in an area that's well connected to transit, well connected by a connected sidewalk network. And we, or if you have, can afford an electric bike, can get around easily without driving. Those are all privileges as well. And so this shouldn't be a test of that, but an understanding of the things that the way your life is arranged that allow you to get around easily, and how that could be different for someone without those connections, that access. So this year we've had over 450 people register. 80 of those were public officials and elected leaders. We actually got a proclamation from our governor here in Washington state calling it for an official Week Without Driving. We got another one from one of the counties. The proclamation is pretty exciting because it not only talks about the access needs and why this is an important challenge to understand access for non-drivers, but also draws the connection between talking about mobility access and public health and climate health. We're still sitting in a lot of smoke here in Seattle, and those climate connections are really important. This year, we also had tremendous support from transit agencies throughout Washington state. We had 15 sign up on a letter of support with us to support the week, to challenge their boards and their staff to participate. And that was really wonderful to see. I just had an exit interview with one of the transit agency CEOs yesterday from Pierce County. And he was telling me how it was such an amazing learning experience for him personally. And next year, he's going to make sure that he really encourages more staff to join as well. So we are in the process of building a resource website, a story map from some of the stories of people who participated this year. And I would love to share that with you all and encourage you as audience members from throughout the country, perhaps from throughout the world, to create your own Week Without Driving challenge in the future. And as we get that resource up and ready to release, we can let you know about it. You can sign up. You get a notification from us at weekwithoutdriving.life. And you can also follow me or Disability on Twitter and Dismobility is on TikTok as well if you're a video person. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mike and turn it over to the panel of our wonderful folks who joined the challenge, who participated in the challenge, and who encouraged others to join us as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to ask you a question first. Anna, is there a date set for the next Week Without Driving challenge in Washington State?
There is not yet. I think we're still figuring out this. We moved it a little bit earlier this year, so it wouldn't be in the midst of the heavy, what we thought would be rain, now is smoke. And so we may move it to June next year, and we may actually split it up over a couple of weeks to allow us to do more local events. So no calendar reservations yet. But again, if you sign up, we could be in touch if you're interested in doing a coordinated event with us.
Right, so you're suggesting that there's the chance for people to do it at the same time, or potentially to do it on their own schedule if they wanted. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is what you're hearing, yes.
Okay, got it. So mark your calendars if you want to share in the, we would love at America Walks, if anybody wants to engage in it, let us know too. We want to help promote this and support this. We'd love to see it in more places. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jani first, as an elected official who went through this. I'd love for you just to share your experience and, your takeaways and anything else you want to share about what this meant to you participating in the Week Without Driving challenge.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you to Anna and all the staff that organized this event. For those that aren't familiar with the community in which I live, Pierce County is south of Seattle and King County. And we have an incredibly large unincorporated part of our community. And I live in an area that feels like a city, looks like a city, but is unincorporated, meaning we don't have the city infrastructure. So one of the first things I noticed when I was finally going to catch the bus was that I did not have sidewalks from my home to the bus stop. And I had broken sections of pavement, I had potholes and places where obviously water had collected or could collect. Hasn't rained in a really long time here. And so I think when I was walking early in the morning, I brought a flashlight to make sure that I didn't hurt myself. It's just little things like that if I get in my car in front of my house, I don't have to worry about that. But if I don't have a car, I had to worry about that. I had to think about what shoes I wore. I had to think about where I was going for the full day and what kinds of things I had to bring with me. I had to worry about my safety when I was walking early in the morning or coming back later in the evening. And so simple tasks, simple events had to either be shifted because of the bus schedule, or I had to decline them. I couldn't go and see my family because they live outside our transit zone. So I literally was unable to do things that were important to me because I did not have the ability to safely move myself there without my own car. And so those little things that we take for granted if we have a car, they're just gone. And that was like an aha moment for me, which I think is why this is so important for elected officials to participate in. And I don't know if that was enough, but I'll leave it to questions.
Well, we'll keep rolling. Devin, you work for elected officials. I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. So I'll just turn it to you. Take it away, sir.
Sure thing. Thank you. And I do have to say that I'm really lucky to have Anna as a neighbor. Anna reached out to our office last year to participate in the first Week Without Driving. And just a little bit about our community. We're located in Southeast Seattle. So it's an area of the city that has very poor infrastructure when it comes to getting around by walking, rolling, or biking. There are portions of the neighborhood that don't have sidewalks. The transit access really only goes north-south. really not east-west. And then we're really isolated from the rest of the city because we're cut off really by two major interstate highways, I-5 and I-90. And it's also an area of the city that used to be, not so much anymore, but at one point it was the most diverse zip code in the country. We have, I believe, the last time we checked, around 46 different languages spoken in our area. So it's really important for us to, ensure that we are not continuing to do harm that's been really baked into the way that the city has worked and the way that government has worked across the country. And for my boss, Councilmember Tammy Morales, it's really important for her as well to start to repair that harm that's been done to Black and Brown communities and to low-income communities, and then also to folks who, like folks on this panel who might not be able to drive, for example, due to disability. We have a very large portion of the population in the South End too who does have a disability, so that's also very important for us. And I'll just say, thanks to Anna reaching out, Councilmember Morales has really taken a very big stand on mobility and safety of people in our district. We learned earlier this year that we have basically year over year the highest amount of deaths and serious injuries caused by collisions. And that's been something that she's taken to heart. I would even say right now we're in the middle of our budget process, and having done the week without driving right before our budget has influenced the things that we're asking for to really make those infrastructure changes that can keep people safe. So it's been very, very useful and a very good experience.
Are you in a position where you could describe some of the difference, what changed as a result in terms of budget requests or the like, or policy changes requested?
I can if I don't mute myself. Yeah, so for sure. I can look at a couple of budget requests, or a couple of the requests and a couple of the items that we passed. So last year we expanded the city's home zone pilot program. And so folks might be familiar with that, but if you're not, in essence, it's really, it's using traffic calming and diverters and things like this to really create safe spaces for people to walk, to bike, and to roll, especially in areas of our city where we don't have sidewalks. So the average sidewalk in Seattle costs about $500,000 to install. The average home zone, which covers about 5 city blocks, costs about the same amount of money. And so we have definitely used this experience, that the council member had last year, and then that she had this year as well, to first triple the size of that home zone program last year, and then in this budget try to triple it again, and really try to think creatively about ways that we can make spaces for people who can't drive. And it's like Anna said, for folks in our district, you could have a disability, you could be low income, or you could choose not to drive. And so we want to make sure that the road is really safe for everybody, regardless of if they choose to, or if their mobility is kind of defaulted to them. We're also using this as a way, in this budget, I can talk about that. We have in Seattle these plastic, like these paint and plastic bike lanes all throughout the city, mostly in honestly richer, whiter areas of the city. But then we do have some here in the South End, and we have put in a budget request to replace all of those plastic posts with bigger concrete, like very well protected infrastructure, and that came from the interactions that my boss had just this year during the week without driving.
Thank you. It's really great to see. that direct link between the campaign and changes in the budget process based on the council members' experiences. Krystal, I'm really interested, in getting your observations on it, as an advocate in this space as well. So, feel free to share whatever you'd like to share, but I'm really particularly interested in your own experiences and the experiences of growing the campaign.
Yes, most definitely. So I've been involved for the last I'm sorry, for the last 2 years. So I'm a wheelchair user myself, and I'm president of the Tacoma Area Commission on Disabilities. So I've always been a real big advocate, right? And I have actually never driven, so I've always relied on public transportation, getting rides, however I can get around, whether it's like, getting rides or pushing myself. I've always been really physically active. If it's close enough, I'll just push myself. But when I heard about the week without driving from Anna, I literally was like, okay, cool. I'll try to get people to do what I do, and so yeah, I've just been trying to get city council members and everybody that I already work with to do it. And the first year I was actually really working with Christina Walker here in Tacoma. She's a city council member here. And right away, because she was already working with me with just different things to fix the curb cuts and bus stops and things like that I was already kind of complaining about from things that I already seen, she was up for it and she tried it. And not only did she try it last year, but she also did it this year and everything. But since then, with Christina Walker, she, I think because she is seeing the perspectives of people with disabilities and how hard it is, like she tried it this year. And not only is she, staying faithful to that, but she is actually just like, okay, so what project do you want to help me out with now? Or do you want me to help you out with now? And she is helping with the, so I guess it's like the intersection to where I live. There's like I started off with the bus stop, but it ended up being the bus stop, the sidewalk, the going all the way down. It's a big old huge section that, it's a big old huge project now at this point. But I was initially complaining about just the bus stop, that it was just not, I guess, reachable for me. And the situation with that was like, I was complaining, it just didn't make sense to me. That's just my lingo. It didn't make sense that the bus stop had like the platform, the sidewalk. But I'm like, there's gravel on each side of the bus stop. But it's like, why didn't the sidewalk go past the bus stop? It went to gravel. It didn't make sense to me. And like, we're talking about weather and stuff like that, when it rained, when it snowed, things like that. And I mean, even when little simple things happened or whatever, when just water just happened to get on that gravel, it made it so much harder for me to get off where the sidewalk stopped and go through a little patch of gravel that they just decided not to fill for who knows what reason. I don't even know why they just decided to not fill it, but my wheels would get stuck in there, and it made it that much harder for me to reach that bus stop that does have sidewalk, the platform and everything. And that's what I started to complain to city council about. And Christina Walker took on the thing, and she's been helping me, but she participated in the week without driving. So she kind of already knew the difficulty because she participated in the week without driving. So to this day, we're still working on that, to get the funding and stuff, but she's kind of that person on city council to help me get all that funding for that. And that's right across the street from where I live. So that's one of the main bus stops that I use for my public transportation, and I feel like just that example alone, that's one of the main reasons why we need to get not only like legislation and, other people in those roles to do it, but just our regular community, you know, because even with that example, like I have to call my neighbor that time. It's like, hey, can you come help me? You know, once I get there, and they understand, like, okay, I'll go help you and stuff, because it gets tiring for me just to push myself in that little section. You know, so even if neighbors and just regular citizens would to do the week without driving, then maybe they'll be more sensitive to the needs of people with disabilities, you know, and maybe just another note, maybe they would support when it comes to voting, and rather than like, oh, I don't want to spend my money on that, you know, if they were to participate in the week without driving, maybe they would understand why we're asking them for that. You know,
Yeah, I was really struck by the number of elected officials that Anna mentioned. And in addition to the elected officials, the agency officials, I saw the WashDOT secretary, Roger Millar, was also participating in the week without driving.
mm-hmm.
What has been your, and feel for anyone who can take this, but Krystal or Anna or Jani or Devin, anyone to take it. What's the experience like in trying to recruit people to do it? What's your approach, and what's the type of responses do you get, and to what do you attribute the growth from one year to the next? So I had 3 different questions in there. So anybody who wants to take a shot at any of them, I'm sorry about that. But how to grow, and what are people's objections to doing it?
Well, since I was just talking, I can, in terms of just getting people to join, with me, I've always, just like I was just telling you guys, I've always just shared my own experiences, you know, like, and in my own, I live in Tacoma, so in my own community, just from the people that live around here, I would just say like, oh, you know, this street doesn't have any sidewalk, or, you know, and even on a different note that I didn't cover, like the main streets are one thing, but then residential streets are a different thing, you know? So what about actually getting from your house to the main street that has the actual, you know, bus stop? You know, how hard is that? And I'm speaking for people with disabilities, you know, like, but even for the walking person, if there's nothing but gravel, but it's a busy street on a small street, kind of, where people just speed and stuff like that, it makes you feel unsafe. So it's like, you know, try that and see how safe you feel to get to that main, even if it's only like, because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, it's only 1/4 of a mile, but try doing that with people that don't care when they're speeding with no sidewalk. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Krystal, I think
that's
what
my
you pointed out there makes a ton of sense, that, you know, having the work we do grounded in the story map, and grounded in the fact that there are so many people without access or reliable access to a car, that it really is the compelling reason people choose to do it. And as much as we can get people like Krystal, people like Devin to make those invitations to elected leaders who have that lived experience of not being able to drive, that's, I think, what has made people say yes. And that's been really exciting. I think also in the second year of doing this, having, you know, had people do it last year and see, you know, having testimonies from electeds who joined us was really helpful. And also for some of the agencies heads and transit agencies who participated, transportation and transit agencies, having them see last year the press we got and the shift in perspective of some of the electeds who joined us, that was really powerful as well. And so they saw how joining and promoting the event and helping encourage their staff and leadership to participate could really help them get support for, you know, active transportation funding, for transit funding. And I think that piece was really terrific. We had a representative testify on, I'm trying to remember, it was the House or Senate floor here in Washington State, and our state legislature, about her experience and, you know, trying to get somewhere without sidewalks. And those sidewalks are getting built now. And that's because of a lot of advocacy through a lot of different channels and at different levels of government. But it definitely has started to shift things. And I guess one of the other questions that I wanted to jump in here and ask Councilmember Hitchen about the safety connection, because we have in Washington State, like the rest of the country right now, a real epidemic of traffic violence. And so, if there's any observations you had in participating during the week. I think I read in your prep article about trying to think about where you could walk your dog safely. Thinking about how this experience helped you gain understanding around what it might take to address some of the challenges we face right now as a state and as a country with pedestrian safety and active transportation user safety.
Thanks for the question. I think when I wrote that blog entry, it was all about thinking about what do I have to think about. And one of the things I do regularly, I have a very large dog, and he needs a lot of exercise, and I, just like walking to the bus, I don't have sidewalks. So sadly, I put my dog in my car. I drive to another location, a college campus that has lights and sidewalks and paved areas where we can walk safely, and we don't have to worry about cars running into us or getting in the way. I have to run about college students running around, but my dog alerts me there. But that's something I had to think about. And I think as a policymaker, one of the things we're in the middle of doing is our transportation improvement plan. And I directly asked my policy staff, okay, so how much are we actually spending on improving our curb cuts so they actually work for wheelchair and mobility devices? How many lane miles of sidewalks and of bike lanes are going in with all these projects, because they're spending millions of dollars on roads. But how are they articulating to me as a policymaker who now really wants to know, are you actually building sidewalks while you're expanding this road? Because in the descriptions, that's not always pulled out. That's not highlighted. And that's incredibly important. And especially now that I've tried walking in my own community to catch a bus. I've gotten off the bus in another area in my community and had to walk on gravel in dress shoes for about a quarter mile to get home. And I'm going to tell you, my feet did not appreciate it, and nor did my shoes. And had I thought about it, I could have planned differently and brought different shoes. But those are things in basically a city-like area, which is where I live as far as the density. I don't have sidewalks. I don't even have road that's safe for me to walk on, because the road crumbles at the edges in some areas. And so those kinds of things as a policymaker, that I truly didn't have those experiences because I'd found workarounds. As somebody who was able-bodied and with a car, I knew how to avoid those things. If I'm Krystal, I can't avoid them because I have to get into my wheelchair every day, and I have to roll out of my home, and I can't avoid them. I can't get in a car and just drive myself somewhere to avoid it. It's the life she lives, and she's not alone. And so as a policymaker, now thinking with that, I think that's what this experience brought to me. And I think that's incredibly important because I've now lived thinking that way. Does that help answer the question, Anna? Okay, she's smiling. I'm going to say yes.
Yes.
Devin, how about your experience? I'm curious with the Seattle City Council. I know that Tammy did it. Were you able to recruit other members of the City Council or others nearby to do it as well? And how'd that work?
We weren't able to recruit. Personally, I wasn't able to recruit any other members of the council. However, I would say, stemming from the first time that we did the Week Without Driving with Tammy, we were able to kind of foster a better relationship with the Department of Transportation, because it goes back to, I think what a lot of folks have been talking about so far in this panel is this understanding of what it's like to be a person who can't drive, kind of this illusion of choice. Because for a lot of Americans, you have the choice between the bus or your car, or you can walk or whatever. You have a multitude of options. And when you present to somebody like a department head, like the head of the Department of Transportation, that you cannot, you actually don't have that choice if you're one in four people who live in Washington State. If you're under the age of 16, if you're an elder, if you're a person living with disabilities, if you're a low-income person, you don't have that choice. And so over the past year and a half, really, we've had the opportunity to show others within city government that this isn't a choice. When we want to build out sidewalks, it's not because we're trying to do something fancy, or if we want to build out a bike lane, it's not because we want to cater to a certain class of in a Peloton sports bike guys. Or if we want to close down a street. During the beginning of the pandemic, the city of Seattle closed down 20 miles of streets in what they called their Stay Healthy Streets program. And the Stay Healthy Streets program was really interesting because in some places, I would say kind of up in the north, where in Greenwood, for example, which is a place that's kind of getting a lot of attention right now, or in the central part of the city, there are like folks who really adhere to this idea that they were people first streets and kind of car second streets. And because of that, I think they've gotten more infrastructure, whereas down in the South End, for example, where I live and where I work, we heard a lot of folks who were unhappy about this idea that we suggested that these streets were for more than just driving on. And because of that, the city decided to kind of back off a little bit, maybe not do so much in the South End. But again, because we were able to work with the department, actually Anna and I and several other people took the council member and the new director of the Department of Transportation on a bike ride, maybe just about 3 weeks ago, and showed them the need to continue making those investments. And so even though we haven't been able to necessarily, or I personally haven't been able to get other folks on the council on board, I think it's equally important to get folks in the executive branch, especially since we tell them how to spend the money, but then they're the ones who actually do spend the money. And maybe next year we can get a couple of other council members on board too, folks who maybe live in more urban parts of the city, folks who understand the need for safety. And I will end by saying that because my boss has started to talk about safety as this top priority, I do feel like that has changed. When we have our transportation committee meetings, when we have council meetings about items related to transportation, it's been less about throughput and more about safety. And I do think that's in direct correlation to the kind of advocacy that folks like Anna are doing.
Devin, can I just ask a really quick follow-up for Devin? Because I think one thing that really was interesting to me this year was, we'd been in touch last year, and I know you were integral to get Tammy to participate. And then this year you made a video and you shared your own personal story about not driving. And I'm curious about how you came to that place where you wanted to be really public and out there and active with your story. And because I think for me, that was a really exciting development. And I think is to have a staff member of a council member be talking about this as their own experience really, I think, has helped shift things as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say it was a long journey for me to talk about being a non-driver. When I was younger, I used to say like, yeah, I'm doing it for the environment, or like, one less car on the road, as ways of avoiding saying like, I can't drive. And for a long time, I think there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt associated with that. And I think, Krystal, you could probably, you can identify too, that this idea that you feel like you have to make excuses for why you can't do something that other people want you to do. And I think, honestly, I will say that a big reason that I decided to be more open about that, and I started being more open about that in my workplace. This is the first workplace where I've ever been open about it, where I haven't just kind of tried to skate by without letting people know. I think it started there, and then it started broader, and a big part of that too was seeing the work that the Disability Mobility Initiative was doing in Disability Rights Washington. Just this idea that like, oh, I'm not the only person. me and Anna have the same eye condition. This is the first person that I've met in my life in person who has the same eye condition as me. So that was even like, okay, maybe I can be more open about this. And then I've always thought about using any kind of like microphone that I have to empower other people. And I would say, one of my mantras comes from Harvey Milk, that without hope, the us's of the world give up. And so I always try to give people hope. And then when Mike McGinn was mayor of Seattle, he had a program in his office called Engage Seattle that I took part in 15 years ago, almost, maybe 12 years ago, that taught me how to use my voice in that way. And I actually used that directly when I was making that video, to find a way again to kind of do a call to action to people to not feel that guilt and not feel that isolation, and really try to understand that if you come together with other people, you can make a positive change, which is really evident with what's already happened.
Yeah, so in the mayor's office, we had a program to train people how to be community organizers. And we used the teachings of Marshall Gans and the role of public narrative. And by the way, I'm bringing that narrative into our trainings here that we do at America Walks to train people how to be organizers. I'm just struck by so many different things, and thank you for telling that story, Devin. That was very, very moving and inspirational. Just listening to the conversation, that idea, I think that's such a powerful concept that you introduced, that decision makers can view transportation choices as being about choice, right? When they're not at all about choice. And, if a bridge goes out, they replace the bridge immediately because you can't have a disconnected network for the vehicles. But we don't think of that network for, everyday users, and for those that can't drive. And all of us were there at one point in our lives and are likely to be there again at another point in our lives. So it is a much broader coalition. So that kind of default assumption about how roads should be built is a really powerful one. And that's one of the things trying to change. And Krystal, one of the things I learned as mayor, and I repeat it to people, and I don't think people believe me when I tell it to them, but when I was working to get sidewalks in my own neighborhood, I was told by the Department of Transportation that we don't even have money to maintain the arterials. We don't have enough money for residential streets too. And everyone's nodding their heads. It's very hard for people to believe that a wealthy region like Seattle, or like the city of Seattle, doesn't actually have enough money to take care of its basic infrastructure. Yet at the same time, we are spending lots of money on expanding highway infrastructure in particular, yet we can't find the money. So and that's part, shave a few minutes off of everyone's commute, but we can't make a safe walk to the bus stop for people. So that's just what I'm struck by, is really trying to change the dynamic of what is what should actually be the default transportation spending and the default user of transportation. So having said that, we've kind of gotten at this question partially, but this is one of the ones in the chat. Do staff from any of the local or state DOTs get involved, either to participate or discuss the issues? And I'd love to, you've shared a little bit about that, but maybe you all could expand on that a little bit.
I was just typing an answer to that and hit enter as you started talking about it. But yes, we actually, with the encouragement and leadership of Secretary Millar, who is our state DOT head, really had wonderful participation from WashDOT. I think we had over 40 staff participate, and we are in the process of organizing a webinar where they can share their feedback and what they learned from the event. So that has been really wonderful. And then our state, in the city of Seattle, we had a lot of staff participate there. And then some of the transit agencies as well. C-Tran down in the Vancouver, that's right across the river from Portland, had a lot of staff participate as one I can think of right now. Twin Transit in the Centralia area. So really transit agencies of all sizes got pretty excited about this event.
I'm seeing some great nuts and bolts questions in the Q&A about the campaign. What kind of budget did it take to do a week without driving?
Yeah, so Disability Mobility Initiative is a small program. I'm the only full-time staff person, and then I had Kimberly Hitchen, who's been one of our contractors and part-time staff people, be the lead this year. And so she had about half time for about 6 months to help support it this year. So very small budget. We did get some additional funding right as we were about to kick off the week to then create this resource, toolkit resource and story map resource that we will have online, hopefully at the beginning of next year, to share with you all and encourage other parts, other states, other local jurisdictions to organize and try to organize one of these. I've had conversations with disability organizations and transportation advocates in other states, and I know that there's interest. I had a really wonderful article written for us in Streets Blog this year by an advocate from Colorado who had watched from afar last year, and it was just like this is why this event matters. That was a really great piece. I can post a link to that to check it out. And yeah, we will continue to encourage and try to support other states in doing this. I think what has made it easier for us is having the story map organizing to sort of ground us in. And so I do think, having it come out of community organizing work can be really powerful. But I also think transit agencies or, state DOTs, local DOTs could participate and organize it on their own as well. And that could also be really effective.
Well, that's interesting, because now, did you have any pre-made materials for people on what it meant to join, or was it all just basically word of mouth? How many people just signed up and how many people were asked, I guess, is the question I'm asking too, in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if I know those numbers off the top of my head. We asked a lot of people, and a lot of people, I don't know if they got our emails, they, didn't respond. We tried to ask, anyone connected at all to transit leadership in the state of Washington, through MPOs, transit agency leadership, transportation agency leadership, local elected, state electeds. We really tried to cast a really wide net. And we also partnered with, I think it's over 20 other nonprofit and advocacy organizations in the state, so they could help invite people that they had relationships with. And I'm going to forget folks if I start to list them, but it was really wonderful, a wonderful range of, bike and pedestrian advocates, transportation advocates, environmental groups, other disability organizations. And so that's sort of the only way that we could, with our limited capacity, have sort of a statewide reach. And I'll just call out Snow Tracks, Snohomish County Transportation Coalition in particular. Both years has had really wonderful turnout, and actually organized a similar webinar to this on Monday with just elected leaders from Snohomish County. So I think that would be, we would love to get to the place where every county in the state, we'd have transportation advocates, or every city being able to sort of host a bunch of local events, host webinars. And that's, I think, what we're building to. And ultimately, right, doing that in more cities and counties throughout the country would be terrific as well.
Yeah, there was a question too about the role of partner organizations in building engagement and participation. So what I'm really hearing is it's really about getting as many advocates as possible at the grassroots level to just ask through their personal connections others to join. It wasn't a top-down advertising campaign, it was a bottom-up asking campaign, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and asking in every way possible. And yeah, see who's willing to take on the challenge and join us.
You mentioned the story map. Could you just explain that a little bit more to people who may not understand what that is?
Yes, and I will paste a link into the chat too, but that was from the Transportation Access for Everyone story map is sort of the visible manifestation of our organizing work. So, you know, we have connected with non-drivers from throughout Washington state, and some of those people have agreed to share their stories publicly. And so that's what the story map is. It's those stories documented. So, you know, it's how the person gets around, what barriers they experience, what part of the state they live in, what they would like people who can drive to understand about their mobility experience. So that has sort of allowed us to then, you know, Krystal was one of the first people I interviewed for that a long time ago, and actually has helped recruit a bunch of other folks to be interviewed with our team. And so that really is sort of the organizing work that underlies what we do and how we sort of build that voice and build that power and make it possible. I think too, it's really great to hear from Devin that, you know, for people who perhaps, you know, I also didn't identify as disabled for a long time and tried to be very private about my vision and my inability to drive. Lived in New York City just so I didn't have to talk to people about it. So, you know, to allow people to feel comfortable that there is a community out there and that they're not alone, and that if we actually advocate together, we can build power and start to create some of the changes that we'd like to see in our communities to make sure that everyone can get around comfortably and safely.
And that testimony is just so powerful to how much we view driving as a default mode that everyone should participate in. Like that to me is like one of the biggest takeaways of this, and that the role of individuals telling their story makes in creating a broader case for change. So thank you all for your role in that. Jani, if you were to use a closing, I'm kind of going to go around and see if we can't do like a closing 3 minutes. We'll try to get to more of the questions that you asked. I saw a couple of raised hands, just toss them in the chat. We'll have a blog post we'll write up at the end of this. We'll include all the links to everything that was shared in the chat. We'll review the questions and toss a little more in there. So please make sure you do it. I'll get a little bit ahead of myself because I'm just going to kind of go around and ask everyone to kind of give a closing statement, so to speak. Like what do you really want people to take away? So we'll end roughly on time. We may go a couple of minutes over. If you think that this type of if you appreciate America Walks bringing this to you, please go to americawalks.org and consider donating to support our advocacy. We're trying to be a national voice for accessible, inclusive, equitable, and walkable communities, as well as train people to be local advocates and share this type of stuff and support, you know, the next iteration of Week Without Driving in more places. If you'd like to give us a little more resources to do that, that's great. If you want to support Disability Mobility Initiative, I know they'd love your help as well. So there we go. My pitch is done. Let's get the closing statements. We'll go around the horn, and I'll start with you, Jani. If you had a couple of minutes to say what should people take away from this and moving forward.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I think the number one thing is try it. If you are able to get in a car and you don't have to have that concern, take a week, figure out what it would do. And when you realize, oh, I can't do things, then what's your workaround? So the example, my family I couldn't see, we scheduled for the following week because I would be driving then. And really go through that process, because it makes you better, you are better able to empathize, and then also advocate for our community members that can't or won't drive. And the can't is for a variety of different reasons. It's economic, it's disability, it's they are traumatized and they're scared to drive cars. We have people who have mental health issues where they can't drive, or they're on medications and they can't or should not drive. So we have this entire group of people who depend on our infrastructure and our public transit. And if you are just getting in your car and you fix all your problems that way, you don't understand. And so I think for me as a policymaker, I think I'm really going to push my colleagues to participate this, even if they only do it one day. But it was a phenomenal experience for me and really kind of changed the way I think about transportation as a policymaker and just as a community member. I noticed things I never noticed before. You know, like, hey, there's no curb cut, or the curb cut is close, like out in the street. Like, I don't understand that. Like, why are they going out into the street and then onto it, a road or a sidewalk, and just little things that I wouldn't have noticed. And so I think the experience is really powerful. And I would hope not just elected officials, but support staff, and just community members would take part. So I appreciate, somebody asked was there an incentive? I picked up some Twitter followers, so thanks for that, but I was not paid. The incentive was really, for me, it was learning. And so I was very excited to take part. Thank you.
Devin.
Sure thing. Yeah. Well, I will say, I mean, if there's one thing that I can kind of leave behind with everybody to think about is, again, this idea of choice that I mentioned. Again, according to the US DOT, 1 in 3 people just about doesn't have that choice. So it's really something to think about. And again, it depends on what community you live in. Here in Washington State, it's 1 in 4. In your community, it could be more. And so there's a good chance that you know a non-driver. There's a good chance, like Mike had said, that you were in your life a non-driver, unless you were a really radical 5-year-old who took the keys to the car. But you know, we just need to kind of, as people who work in government or people who are advocates, need to think more critically about issues like walkability and safety and infrastructure and building equity into all of that. And you know, I just really want you to think about that. You know, that for a lot of folks, it isn't about, you know, whether or not they can go from point A to point B this way or this way or this way, or or it's just that they only have one way to get from point A to point B. There's nothing else that they can do about it. And then I would also just say that if you're interested in doing something like this, before I worked in the council member's office, I did community organizing and political organizing for about a decade. And I will tell you, the secret sauce to organizing is just talking to your friends and asking them to ask their friends and asking them to ask their friends. Organizing is actually pretty simple. It's just getting a lot of people to ask other people to do the same thing. And I think you could probably do that. They had a very small budget for the Week Without Driving here at the Disability Mobility Initiative, but I bet you could do it for free. And so that would be my challenge to you, is just talk to your friends and their friends and their friends. And I know that you could do something like that in your community too.
Krystal.
So in closing, I would say, just step out of your comfort zone. You know, a lot of times people just want to stay in their comfort zone, and a lot of times people think everything is okay for everybody already because, you know, we were talking about there is funding, but how much funding is there? You know, a lot of people don't realize there's not enough funding, you know, and like I was saying earlier, they may drive past and think like, oh, there's sidewalk right there. So they just think there's sidewalk everywhere. Or they see a curb cut, but they don't realize how steep the curb cut is. Or like even how you were saying, Jani, how far the curb cut goes. They don't realize all that. You know, they just drive by really quick and they just see something white. So they think it's, you know, it's okay. And, you know, it's there. But unless you actually experience it yourself, you know, then you're really going to get the gist of how things really are. And maybe it'll impact your choices in the future, not just for yourself, but for other people around you, you know? So that's what I would say.
Anna.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to answer some of these questions in the chat, and I'll just have to email folks later. But Yeah, I also just want to shout out our partnership with excuse me. The state employees were challenged through our transportation demand management program to participate in the challenge. And we don't have a really good way of tracking how many people participated through that connection. But it was really exciting to start to reach out and have people think about this, you know, the transit demand management angle for those of you sort of in that space. There's also a connection there. So yeah, I'm just thrilled that the event has grown and that we hopefully can build some more national excitement about expanding it in other places. And I think it's something too that, you know, it's possible to do this, you know, your own way. There's no, you know, set recipe of how it has to happen. And that having it sort of happen in a bunch of different places and have groups come up with what makes sense for you and your state and your town could really lead to some wonderful ideas that we haven't thought of here. Just excited to see what this could build into. So thanks, Mike, and thanks America Walks for allowing us to host this conversation with you.
You know, Anna, it says, I'm looking at the chat, I have a number of things that says Anna is typing an answer. Do you have to hit a send on your answer? You may have answered a bunch and not sent you.
Oh no,
So,
okay, all right, I will
you check. And while you check, I'll talk for like 1 minute. So you heard one or a couple of minutes so you can get that done if anyone was waiting for an answer to the question. So I wasn't planning on a close, but here we go. I'll just give another one. I think that the other thing that really, you know, one of the things that's always inspired me is that I believe that building the types of communities where people of all ages and abilities can get around is like, it's good on its own merits, right? Like mobility and community is a quality of life issue for everyone that we all benefit from, right? Even if we are able-bodied and can drive a car and have the means to do so, I think I think one of the reasons why people want to move into these types of communities is because they're the opportunity to connect with and be more deeply engaged in a community where people are out and about and fully engaged with their community. So we all benefit from it just from a pure quality of life and community thing. But the data and evidence on when you do that, what that does for safety of people is huge. What that can do to reducing air pollution and improving the health outcomes for people. What that means for reducing fossil fuel use and improving the climate. Is really the IPCC, the scientists who do the reports, their last report really focused in on the role of good community design and walkable, accessible communities to reducing emissions. It's great for economic vitality. You know, there's a reason why, and it's terrible that we have a shortage of these walkable, transit-friendly, accessible places. So the price is bid way up, and more people are forced to live in distant from job centers and in places that don't have good infrastructure. So we really need to make it easier for people to live in places and be more connected. So there's a huge equity impact as well if we can extend the benefits of these types of communities to more people. And it's a choice. It's a choice that we make in budgets and who we elect and how we do our work. So I just want to say just how inspired I am by this campaign and the work you all are doing, because it just demonstrates something I've always believed, which is, you know, people collectively can make a difference just by by getting engaged and talking to their community. And, you know, we need a whole lot more of it. So thank you all for doing this, and we're all in. Let us know how we can help promote a week without driving and get more people to join in the next campaign. And when we know the date that you guys settle on, we're going to publicize it. Thanks, everybody. And thank you to our audience for joining us, and we'll follow up. Okay.